chat. Okay, so let's go to the standard curve assignment. In that assignment, I do have, in your page for this week, in the module page, you will see a lot of helpful videos, YouTube tutorials as well that you can follow along with. But I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of the things from me that are not going to be listed there necessarily. Okay. So what you would want to do is you're going to be making 3 total graphs, okay, for this assignment. You're submitting your Excel sheet so I can make sure that you're using the formulas correctly and that you're doing things the way they should be done in Excel. I've made this table in a way that you should be able to select it in the corner, where this shows up as a little box, and do a Control-C, Control-V directly into Excel. And it should put it in there as a table exactly as if it was right here. And that will obviously come in handy. So there you go. You have your sets of data. Now the set 3 over here is going to be your average, right? Because you're going to make the third graph with the average, and you will also have the standard deviation showing in there. So first of all, if you want to calculate averages and standard deviations, you want to use the formulas that are already present in Excel. Use those to your advantage. It's not a problem right now for you to take them on your own with a calculator or with a piece of pencil and paper, because they're just 2 numbers. But later on, when we get bigger data sets with tens of numbers or 100 numbers, then you don't want to be sitting there doing standard deviations on your own, obviously. So what we're going to do is use the formulas in Excel. So the first one's going to be average. So I'm going to select the average. When you write AV, =AV, it should pop up. And then I'm going to select the 2 numbers that I want it to average, which are the numbers for the set 1 and set 2. And you would get your new number. And then for the standard deviation, you could do the same thing. You're going to do standard deviation of, it doesn't really matter for us as such, but I'm going to use the standard deviation of sample, and you're going to select those 2, and you'll get a standard deviation overall. Okay, so that's all good. One thing that you need to be aware, you can use these formulas then, and you can drag them down. There's this little green square. You drag that square down, and it will drag the formulas down so that you are averaging each time the 2 numbers that are right here, and you are doing the standard deviation the same way. So you don't have to rewrite the same formula again and again and again. One thing you want to start being aware of is how busy your Excel sheets are looking. So you want to start off leaving everything organized and making it as clean as possible. One of the things that you can do to do that is to make sure that you label the sheet, each sheet, by renaming it. Another thing you can do is reduce the number of decimal points that you have and keep them consistent. In general, I tell people not to use more than 3 decimal points in these sheets. It keeps it nice and clean, easier on your eyes, so you can look at them better and analyze them better. So you would average and do the standard deviation.
How do you change the decimal point?
There's on your Excel, you would see there are these, on this top bar. In the formatting area, you will see these 2 sets of icons, where there's like an arrow going this way and the arrow going that way with zeros. That reduces and increases the decimal point. If it doesn't show up, you could also right click on the, on the actual cell, and you can say format cell, and then change it to number and the number of decimal points you want to use. That's another thing you could do. Okay. You could select like the whole column, for example, and say that I want this entire column to have go to format cell and then change the category from general to number and change to whatever decimal points you want to show. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, having said that, before you do the averages and standard deviation, you actually have to do one more step, which is to reduce the background noise in your data set. So if you look at these percent of samples, so you can think about it as percent blue solution, for example, you see that I've given you starting from 0 all the way to 100, right? So 0, 3.125, 6.25, and so on and so forth. Now, when I'm going to actually change these as well, and I'll show you this way. So I can go to format cells, and you see this shows it as a general. So I'm going to go to number, and I'll say I want 2 decimal points and click OK. And it will change those to be consistent. Okay? Okay, so now what I want to do is actually remove the background noise. The background noise of my sample is the absorbance that you get in a tube where there was no blue solution. So it was just the water molecules floating around and the light bouncing off of the water molecules. That sample is my very, very first sample right here, which is the 0%, right? And so if you look at that, there is a little bit of an absorbance there. There's a 0.035, 0.036 in my two numbers. So what I need to do is remove that from the rest of the numbers. Let's say that there was one of the wells was dirty, so it may have said 0.136 for all I need. So you want to remove that background noise. To do that, I'm going to select this and I'm going to put it right underneath. It will make my stuff easier. And I'm going to give it a new name so I know what it is. So this is going to be my blank corrected absorbance. Now you can leave it like this, or I could merge these 3 cells by clicking on this merge and center, and then it kind of gives it as a title for my little table right underneath. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a formula where I remove this 0.035 from everyone in that first column, and I remove the 0.036 from everyone in the second column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a smart formula. So if I wanted to just remove the number, right? So I want this number, C4, and I want to subtract C4 from it, right? It's going to give me a 0 there. But then if I were to drag this down, it's just going to give me 0 everywhere. I don't want that. I always wanted to remove the C4 from it. So what I can do is I can put a $sign before the C, and I can put a to signify that I always want the column kept the same, and a 4 in and a $sign in front of the 4 to signify that I always want the 4 constant as well. This makes sure that it's always going to remove 0.035 from everybody in that column. However, it also makes sure that it removes 0.035 from everyone in here as well. So when I remove this, it gives, for the first number, it doesn't give me a 0, it gives me a 0.001 because it was a little different. So if I want, so the smart formula needs to be one where I could use it in as many places as possible without having to rewrite my formula. So to make it even smarter, I could tell it, I don't want you to keep the C constant. I only want you to keep the row constant. The column can change when I change the column. And now, when I move it over, it will give you a 0 because for the second one, it still kept the 4 constant, but now it moved to D. And now when I drag it down, it is going to correctly give me the answers in both of these cases. Okay? Does everyone understand the idea behind the smart formula? Yes, no, maybe? Hopefully.
Why did you have to subtract 0.35?
Say it again.
Why do you have to subtract 0.035?
So I had to subtract this first number because this particular absorbance is from a sample that had no blue solution in it. It was only water. So ideally that should have been a 0, but it's not. It has a background noise, right? So this is
Oh,
what we call background noise of our spectrophotometer. Just light going through water is going to give you some absorbance. So that
okay.
we are blank correcting it. So we are removing the background noise. Okay,
Sounds good, thank you.
no problem. Okay, so now for average and standard deviation, I already made the formula. I don't want to do it again. So I can just select the two wells, for one for average and one for standard deviation. I can copy them and I can paste them over here. It's going to give me my new numbers and I'll drag it down and I have my numbers. Okay. So I teach you a lot of Excel and a lot of tricks in there, so you can work smart, not hard, uh, to get your numbers. Okay, so now we are ready to actually make our graphs. And to make your graphs, you are going to select the first column, which gives you the percent of your sample. That's your x-axis. And then if the numbers that you're trying to make are right next, you can just select both of those columns. That's easy. You go to insert, you go to scatter plot, and you will get a graph. That's your general graph. Okay. I'll teach you how to format it in a second. If the numbers that you want are away from each other, so I'm not going to make all, well, maybe I will, but you know, this is just for demonstration purposes. So let's say I want to redo this one and I want to make my new one. So I'm going to do percent sample and set 2, right? So I'm taking set 2. So to select the set 2, after I selected the first column that I wanted, I hit control and selected the second column while hitting control. That let me select two columns that are not next to each other. I believe in Apple computers, it will be command and then select the column that you want. Okay, and then I will do the same thing. I will go to insert and I'm gonna do my scatter plot and I get my second one, right? And then for my third one, which is my averages, right? So I'm just going to average. I'm going to select my first column and then I'm going to select that column by again hitting control and I'm going to go and do my scatter and I got my third. Now ideally you want them to be organized in a way that I can easily grade them and look at them side by side, right? You can change their sizes if you need, so you can fit them the way you would want to show them. You always want them to be, if they are related graphs, you always want to try and make them same size. It makes it easier to organize them the way you want.
Can you go over how to select the ones that aren't next to each other? I have an Apple and I'm kind of having like a hard time doing that.
Okay, so could you try, okay, so select the first one and then hit command, I believe, in your case. So do command and then do the second. Does that work?
So then you just drag it down to the second one.
Yes, so you just drag the second. So, you know, like you would go like this, first one. And in my case, I did the control. And then while I'm hitting my control, I selected the second one.
Oh, okay. So you don't let it go.
No, you don't let it go. Okay,
Perfect. Yeah, got it.
perfect. Okay, so this is like the general scheme that you would want, right? Now you're ready to format them. You want all three of them to essentially look the same, except for obviously the numbers that are actually inside them. So there's some things that I want you guys to be aware of. I'm only gonna do it on the very last one to show you because that's the one with the most things, and then you can replicate it for the others. You would hit on this plus sign, and you would tell it that you do not want any grid lines, right? And that you do want a trend line, and you do want an axis title. Now, typically when we make graphs for our actual papers, we don't want the title up on top. We incorporate it into our caption underneath. This particular assignment, you can leave it there, it's fine. But later on, just be aware that anytime we are making our final figures for a paper or an assignment, we won't have titles on the actual graph, but we'll have it underneath as part of our caption. But you do want axis titles, definitely. And for this last graph, just, all of them are going to have the trend lines. All of them are going to have, you're going to go to trend line. You will hit this little arrow and go to more options. And every single one you want to show display equation on the graph, and then display the R-square value. R-square is the regression value. The closer it is to 1, the more precise, the more accurate, your graph is. Or actually, the more precise it is. Accuracy is separate issue. You can have a very precise graph, so very, very good linear trend, but still not be accurate. Right now, we're not looking at accuracy. We're only looking at precision. So that is an aside we will talk about later when we do later assignment. Now you see that this particular y-axis looks very different than my other two, and this is very busy. So I'm going to change it. You change it by doing right click and then going to format axis. I want the minimum to be 0. I want the maximum to be 1. I actually don't like it so busy. So I'm going to say that I want the majors to be like 0.2 in between, so it's not so busy. It makes it cleaner. Then I'm going to go to my numbers and tell it that I don't want so many decimal points. That's way too many decimal points. So maybe I can do 2 decimal points. So it's cleaner in here. Or even 1 for the graph if you want. And automatically it fixes it so it looks better. Okay, so those are the basic points, right? You also want to click on the graph itself, do a right click, go to format chart area. You want to make sure that it has no line as a border. And so you see that here, compared to the other two, they still have a border on the outside. So you want to make sure to remove the outer border. You want to switch this, so make sure that you write the right axis title, obviously, right? So this is your average absorbance. If you knew the information about what wavelength it is, then you would write that in there as well. Right now, you've just been told it's absorbance. That's all you need to write. And the x-axis is percent solution of whatever solution it was. You're not told what it is, so you won't write that information. Okay. Now, the last thing you need to do in this final graph is add your standard deviations to show how much variation was present in the two sets that you averaged out. To do that, you are going to click on the graph so that it selects the scatter points. So right now you see all the little circles are, selected. You will go in, you would say error bars, and it's going to give you all these various error bars. You don't want those. You want to go to more options. First of all, you're going to say that, yes, I don't want any of the horizontal ones, right? So I'm actually going to delete my horizontal and just leave the vertical. And so I'm going to go back to the vertical. The first one, make sure you look at that horizontal versus vertical. Just delete the horizontals, keep the verticals. You're going to go to both, so it should have both the positive and the negative side. You're going to go to custom, okay? And go to specify value. It's going to say, well, what do you want for your, it's going to open this little box. You're going to click on the arrow for the positive side, and you're going to select the column that contains your standard deviation, all of them, from top to bottom. Then you will click on the negative column, the negative arrow, and you will do the same thing. And then hit this and OK. And it is automatically going to change your standard deviations to the correct ones. Now, this only works if they are in the same order and in the same kind of, relative position as they were in the average column. That's why I always leave the standard deviation column right next to my average column so that I know they're in the same position and they will be done correct. I can put them in easily. Okay, so that is your final graph that is properly formatted for this assignment. For your answers that you need to write about which one is the most accurate, you're going to be looking at the R square primarily, and you're going to be looking at the spread of the numbers. So, like you see on this one, they're kind of up and down. They're not exactly as clean as they are in maybe the second one. This R square is very close to 1, so clearly it is a good R square. To put that answer in, you can put in, there's usually a little text box here. Yes, so under shapes, you can see a text box. You can write whatever it is that you need to write, write your conclusions and answer here. And you can write one little sentence for each one of your graphs or write a combined conclusion paragraph with a couple of sentences, and that's all. Okay? So did everyone get the basic idea?
Yes.
Good.
Dr. Raymond, one last question. This is the absorbance at which wavelength?
So you weren't told which wavelength it is. It's usually at 595 if it is for blue. But I didn't tell you that, so you don't write that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
When you have that information, you would incorporate it. When not, then you would just write that as average absorbance. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, once you have it, you're going to save it, and then you're going to upload it to the assignment, and that would be all. So it is not something that is supposed to take you a long time. It's basically just supposed to give you practice using Excel to make these scatter plots and trend lines and putting in the equations, and that's it. Okay.